Have you ever hiked a trail that felt alive, where the ground pulses under your feet and the air tastes metallic like fresh blood? Imagine stepping onto Blood Mountain at dusk, the rocks glowing red as if stained by an endless slaughter. This isn't just a hike. This is a descent into a living nightmare that claims souls to this day. Blood Mountain isn't just a destination for hikers. It is a massive granite altar steeped in centuries of slaughter and supernatural dread. Long before the first Europeans set foot in Georgia, this peak was the site of a cataclysmic battle between the Cherokee and the Creek nations. Legend says the fighting was so fierce that the blood of the fallen literally stained the rocks and soil a deep, permanent crimson, giving the mountain its name. But for those who spend the night in the stone shelter at the summit, the blood isn't just a historical metaphor, it's a living presence. The atmosphere atop Blood Mountain is notoriously oppressive. Hikers frequently report a sudden, crushing sense of being watched from the dense thickets of rhododendron. The secrets of the mountain often manifest as disembodied war cries echoing through the fog, or the sound of heavy, rhythmic drumming that seems to vibrate from deep within the earth itself. Most unsettling are the reports of the Nunnehi, the Cherokee immortals. These aren't ghosts in the traditional sense, but spirit warriors who reside inside the mountain. Witnesses describe seeing faint, glowing apertures in the rock faces that vanish as soon as they are approached, or encountering hikers dressed in archaic clothing who lead you astray before disappearing into thin air. The psychological chill of Blood Mountain comes from its ability to distort time and direction. Compass needles spin erratically, and seasoned backpackers often find themselves walking in circles, trapped in a silent zone where even the wind refuses to blow. Whether it's the lingering trauma of an ancient war or the presence of a civilization living beneath the granite, the message is clear. The peak belongs to the past. When the sun dips below the horizon and the rocks begin to glow with that eerie reddish tint, you realize that some secrets are buried in the stone for a reason, and the mountain prefers to keep them that way.
You're standing at the bronze plaque on Springer Mountain, the official beginning of the 2,190-mile Appalachian Trail. Your heart is racing with excitement, but the moment you turn to take your first real step, you feel it. Someone is already behind you. They say the ghost of Springer Mountain has been walking the trail longer than any living hiker. Legend speaks of a lone backpacker who vanished here decades ago. Some say in the 1970s, others claim even earlier. He never made it to the next shelter, but he never truly left the mountain either. Hikers describe the same chilling encounter. A tall, lean figure in old, weathered flannel and heavy external frame pack suddenly appears just off the trail. He looks completely solid, not transparent like a typical ghost. He stands perfectly still, staring toward the north. When you try to speak or get closer, he slowly raises his arm and points down the trail, as if saying, "Keep going." The second you blink or take a step forward, he vanishes into the mist. Some thru hikers believe seeing him is a blessing, a sign that the trail has accepted you. Others say he appears as a warning to those who are unprepared or arrogant. The mountains don't care about your expensive gear or big plans. The ghost of Springer doesn't speak, but his message is always the same. This trail doesn't belong to the living. And as you hear the heavy sound of boots walking behind you when no one else is there, you realize the first hiker of the season has already started his journey, and he's waiting for you to lead the way.
There is an unspoken rule among those who live deep in the Appalachian Mountains. If the forest suddenly goes dead silent and the air drops 10 degrees, you don't pull out your camera. You turn around and walk away without looking back. But there is a treacherous, razor-thin stretch of land cutting through the ancient wilderness where turning back
isn't an option. Welcome to the Devil's Backbone. It's a geological spine that feels inherently hostile, a place where the trees grow crooked, the compasses spin aimlessly, and the shadows seem to detach themselves from the trees the moment the sun dips below the horizon. The Backbone isn't famous for just one ghost, it is a superhighway for the paranormal. For generations, travelers navigating these twisting, dangerous roads have reported a paralyzing phenomenon. It usually starts with your vehicle's electronics failing. The headlights dim, the radio turns to static, and the engine simply dies at the absolute worst spot on the ridge. That's when you realize you aren't alone. Witnesses consistently report seeing shadow people, unnaturally tall, impossibly thin silhouettes that step out onto the asphalt. They don't have faces, and they don't reflect any light. They just stand at the edge of the woods, radiating an ancient, heavy malice, watching you struggle in the dark. The true psychological horror of the Devil's Backbone is the sensation of being trapped in a predator's terrarium. As you sit in your dead car, you begin to hear it, the heavy, deliberate crunch of leaves pacing just beyond the tree line, accompanied by the phantom sound of galloping hooves from a cavalry that died a century ago. The Backbone is a tear in the fabric of reality, a place where the Appalachian wilderness drops its natural mask to reveal the nightmare underneath. If your headlights ever catch a pitch-black figure standing on that ridge, lock your doors and pray your engine starts, because on the Devil's Backbone, the road doesn't belong to the living. Ask any park ranger at the Great Smoky Mountains about the highest peak, and they'll give you the standard script about the breathtaking 360-degree views and the concrete observation tower. But catch that same ranger at a local bar after a double shift, and the story changes completely. There's an unwritten rule among seasoned guides: you don't stay on Clingmans Dome after the sun dips and the thick, sentient, whiteout fog begins to crawl up from the hollows. You think you're climbing that peak to see the mountains, but on Clingmans Dome, the mountains are the ones watching you. Clingmans Dome is a place of ancient power, known to the Cherokee as Kuwahi, the mulberry place. It was a sacred, forbidden sanctuary for the masters of the forest and spirits that predate humanity. Today, the summit is surrounded by a ghost forest of dead Fraser firs, their skeletal silver-white trunks clawing at the mist like the fingers of buried giants. It is within this graveyard of timber that the atmosphere turns hostile. When the temperature drops and the clouds swallow the observation deck, the mountain drops its tourist-friendly mask and the shadow people emerge. Witnesses who have been caught in the sudden mist describe a paralyzing sight: massive, pitch-black silhouettes that glide between the dead trees. They aren't traditional ghosts. There is no sun to cast a shadow in that dense fog, yet these figures are darker than the void itself. They move with a terrifying, fluid silence, no snapping twigs, no crunching needles, just a slow, calculated closing of the circle. The psychological weight is immediate. The world turns silent. All sound is muffled by the fog, and you realize you are no longer in a national park. You are in a hunting ground. The true chill of the dome is the sense of absolute isolation. You can be 100 yards from the parking lot, yet feel like you've slipped into another dimension where the laws of man don't apply. Legend warns that if you see a shadow detach itself from a tree and begin to drift towards you, do not run. In the whiteout, running only leads you deeper into the ancient woods. Close your eyes, keep your hand on the concrete railing, and pray the wind clears the path before the things that live in the mist decide you've seen too much. Dark Hollow Trail is one of the most popular paths in Shenandoah, famous for its cascading falls and lush scenery. But dark isn't just a name, it's a physical reality. Due to the steep, narrow geography of the canyon, the sun abandons the hollow hours before it sets on the rest of the mountain. This premature twilight creates a dead zone where hikers frequently experience the Oz effect, a total sensory shift where the rushing water suddenly sounds like distorted human whispering and the air turns thick enough to taste. The horror of Dark Hollow isn't a single monster, it's the sense of predatory observation. Longtime hikers and local trackers speak of the hollow folk, pale, spindly figures that don't walk through the brush so much as they melt into it. Witnesses near the base of the falls have reported looking up at the jagged cliffs only to see someone standing perfectly still, dressed in clothes that look a century out of date. The terrifying part? When you blink, they're 20 feet closer, yet you never heard a single stone shift. They don't want your gear. They seem to be waiting for someone to trip, to twist an ankle, to become a permanent part of the hollow's heavy silence. The psychological trap of the trail is the ascent. Going down is easy, but the climb back up is a brutal, lung-burning struggle. It's during this vulnerability, when you're gasping for air and your muscles are screaming, that the shadows get bold. People have reported feeling a cold hand brush against their neck or hearing their own name whispered from the dark crevices behind the rocks. It's a reminder that the deeper you go into the Appalachians, the more you realize that the beauty is just a lure, and the hollow is always hungry for a fresh set of bones. You've checked your maps, you've calibrated your GPS, and you're convinced you know exactly where you're standing. But in the oldest mountains on Earth, the trail isn't just a line on paper, it's a living entity that can blink out of existence in the time it takes you to sneeze. If you ever find yourself on a path that feels a little too smooth, a little too quiet, and looks like it leads into a thicket that wasn't there a minute ago, stop. Because in the Appalachians, when the path vanishes, it usually means the mountain has decided it's done letting you leave. The vanishing path, the shifting geography of the deep woods. The phenomenon of the vanishing path is one of the most terrifying mysteries of the Appalachian backcountry. It isn't about getting lost, it's about the terrain itself seemingly rewriting its own layout. Seasoned hikers with decades of experience have reported stepping off a well-marked trail for just a few seconds to adjust a pack or tie a boot, only to turn around and find the trail completely gone. In its place is a wall of impenetrable laurel or an ancient moss-covered rock face that looks like it hasn't been disturbed in 1,000 years. The atmosphere of this displacement is often preceded by a phenomenon known as the quiet zone. Suddenly, the ambient noise of the forest, the wind in the leaves, the distant call of a crow, is sucked out of the air as if by a vacuum. The light takes on a strange, sickly yellow hue, and the air grows heavy and stagnant. This is the moment the path moves. Witnesses who have survived these incidents describe a sickening sense of vertigo, as if the world tilted a few degrees. They find themselves on game trails that look man-made but lead in impossible circles, eventually narrowing down until they disappear into nothingness, leaving the hikers stranded in the middle of a dead forest with no landmarks. The psychological horror of the vanishing path is the realization that your technology and your senses are useless. GPS units often glitch, showing the hiker miles away from their actual location or spinning the north arrow in erratic circles. It's as if the mountain creates a pocket dimension, a trap for the unwary. The local advice is always the same. If the path disappears, do not move. If you try to find it, you are only walking deeper into the mountain's gut. Sit down, close your eyes, and wait for the click. The moment the birds start singing again. Only then will the mountain decide to let the trail reappear.
Most people come to Roan Mountain for the world's largest rhododendron gardens, but they leave with a memory they can't quite explain. When the heavy white mist rolls over those high-altitude balds, it doesn't just block your vision, it starts to play tricks on your ears. If you hear a choir singing in a language you don't recognize coming from the center of a cloud, Whatever you do, do not follow the music. Because on this peak, the mist isn't just weather, it's a curtain, and you really don't want to see what's performing behind it. Roan Mountain is a place of haunting beauty, famous for its balds, treeless, grassy summits that offer 360-degree views of the Appalachian chain. But these balds are also the stage for one of the range's most beautiful and terrifying phenomena, the celestial choir. For over a century, hikers, farmers, and explorers have reported the same chilling experience. As a thick, sudden white fog envelops the mountain, the wind seems to harmonize into a sound described as thousands of voices singing in perfect haunting unison. The atmosphere of a Roan Mountain whiteout is unlike any other. The mist here is dense, cold, and strangely silent, dampening the sound of your own footsteps until you feel like you're floating in a gray void. It's in this sensory deprivation that the music begins. It isn't just a whistle of the wind. Witnesses describe complex melodies and choral arrangements that sound like they are coming from just a few yards away. The psychological trap is the urge to find the source. Many have tried to chase the singing, only to find themselves standing on the edge of sheer cliffs or wandering miles off trail into the treacherous rhododendron hells where the branches are so thick you can't see your own feet. Locals warn that the music of the Roan isn't meant for human ears. Some say it's the lingering echoes of ancient spirits, while others believe the mountain itself is a giant acoustic instrument played by the atmosphere. But the terror lies in the recognition, the feeling that the song is calling to you specifically. If you ever find yourself on the Roan and the clouds descend, sit down and cover your ears. The mist eventually lifts, but those who follow the choir sometimes find that the path back to reality has been closed forever.
Most hikers think the scariest thing in the woods is what's hiding behind a tree. They're wrong. The real terror in the Black Mountains is what's standing right under your feet, attached to your boots, but doing things you didn't tell it to do. If you're standing on a ridge and you notice your shadow starts moving a split second after you do, don't wait for it to catch up. Just keep walking, and whatever you do, don't look back to see if it's still attached. The Black Mountain Shadow, the mimic of the high peaks. The Black Mountains of North Carolina are the highest peaks in the eastern United States, home to Mount Mitchell and a landscape dominated by ghost forests of dead silver firs. It is a place of thin air and jagged rocks, but its most famous resident isn't biological. It's the Black Mountain Shadow. While some dismiss it as an optical illusion or a Brocken specter, those who have encountered it in the deep crevices of the range know that this shadow has a mind of its own. The atmosphere of the high blacks is naturally eerie. The wind whistles through the dead timber like a funeral dirge, and the clouds often sit right on top of the trails. The phenomenon usually begins during the golden hour before sunset. Hikers look down into the valley or across a rock face and see a massive humanoid silhouette projected onto the mist. At first, it looks like a simple projection of the observer, but then the psychological horror sets in. You wave your hand, the shadow stays still. You turn to leave, the shadow waves back. The terror of the Black Mountain Shadow is the lag. Witnesses report a horrifying delay in the shadow's movements, as if it is a predator trying and failing to perfectly mimic its prey. Some have even reported seeing the shadow detach from their feet entirely, stepping away into the tree line while the hiker stands frozen in the sun. It's a reminder that in these ancient, sun-scorched heights, light and dark don't always play by the rules of physics. Sometimes the darkness is just a costume worn by something that's been waiting for a body to follow home.
McAfee Knob offers a stunning 270-degree panorama of the Catawba Valley, but its jagged, overhanging ledge holds a darker history. Beyond the physical danger of the drop, local lore speaks of the caller of the knob. The phenomenon doesn't target the massive crowds during the day. It waits for the stragglers, the solo backpackers trying to catch the sunset, or those who camp a little too close to the cliff. It begins with a sudden shift in the atmosphere. The wind stops howling, and a heavy, unnatural silence blankets the summit. Then comes the voice. It never sounds like a stranger. The psychological terror of the caller is its ability to mimic the frantic, terrified voice of someone the listener knows. It might sound like a hiking partner you just separated from, or a family member hundreds of miles away, screaming that they've slipped and are hanging onto a branch just out of sight. The sound echoes up from the sheer drop, perfectly engineered to trigger a hiker's panicked instinct to rush to the edge and lean over. The true horror of being lost on McAfee Knob isn't about wandering off the trail, it's about losing your mind to the abyss. Those who have survived the phenomenon describe a hypnotic, almost magnetic pull toward the edge, accompanied by a sudden wave of severe vertigo. Witnesses who dared to peek over the precipice say they didn't see a fallen hiker. Instead, they saw an unnaturally pale face staring back from the shadows, attached to a silhouette crawling effortlessly up the sheer vertical rock. It's a grim reminder that when you stare into the valley, something ancient and hungry is staring back.
There is a specific sound in the deepest ravines of the Appalachians that you might easily mistake for water rushing over smooth stones. But if you ever stop, hold your breath, and really listen, your blood will run cold. Because water doesn't pause for breath, and water doesn't use consonants. If you find yourself at the bottom of a canyon and the river starts sounding like a crowded room, don't try to make out the words, just climb. The Whispering Gorge, the canyon of stolen voices. Deep within the jagged, primitive wilderness of the Appalachian Range lies a plunging chasm known by locals simply as the Whispering Gorge. Often completely inaccessible by standard trails, this sheer drop of ancient quartz and granite is a geological anomaly. The towering rock walls create an unnatural acoustic chamber, trapping the wind and the sounds of the rushing river below. But the gorge traps more than just the elements. It traps echoes of things that shouldn't be speaking. The atmosphere at the canyon floor is notoriously disorienting. The sunlight barely penetrates the canopy, and the air is perpetually damp and freezing. The phenomenon begins subtly. A hiker setting up camp will hear what sounds like two people having a hushed argument just around the next bend of the river. But as you walk toward the sound, it shifts, staying exactly one bend ahead of you. The voices never raise in volume, and they never speak a recognizable language. It sounds like a wet, guttural dialect played in reverse, overlapping in a chaotic, maddening loop. The true psychological terror of the Whispering Gorge is its ability to learn. Backpackers who have spent the night at the bottom report that the gorge doesn't just produce random noise, it mimics. First, it repeats the sound of your tent zipper, then the crunch of your boots. By 3 a.m., the hushed, watery voices outside your tent are whispering your own conversations from earlier in the day, perfectly matching your cadence and tone. The unwritten rule of the gorge is simple. No matter what you hear in the dark, and no matter whose voice it uses, never, ever whisper back.
That's 10 Appalachian mysteries that still haunt the mountains. Which one chilled you the most? Write in the comments. The best answers may be featured next time. Subscribe and hit the bell for more real, unexplained cases. Stay vigilant.